Every summer, I get more and more phone calls from people who want to live on Lake Lanier. Once the weather starts to heat up and people have more time to travel, they find themselves visiting the lake and they decide it's a place they want to live permanently. So what is it really like to live on Lake Lanier? Hi, I'm Sarah Maslowski with KeyPoint Homes Group, a local real estate agent helping families from all across the country relocate right here to the Northeast Metro Atlanta area. As a resident of Lake Lanier myself, I can tell you exactly what it's like to live here. Lake Lanier spreads throughout a total of 5 counties, with a majority of it sitting in Hall and Forsyth counties, with 692 miles of shoreline, and it takes up about 37,000 acres. The south end of the lake is only 50 miles north of Atlanta, and the north end is about 65 miles from the city, depending upon where you're coming or you're going. There are 7 towns that sit on the lake, so you can choose from smaller towns like Murrayville, Claremont, and Lula, or you can consider bigger towns like Gainesville, Cumming, and Dawsonville. The north end of Lake Lanier is a bit more rural, and it tends to be a bit more affordable since it's not as close to all the shopping and restaurants and amenities that you're going to find in the other bigger cities. Now, the south end is usually a lot pricier because it is closer to shopping and restaurants, and it's closer to Atlanta. Lake Lanier has 11 public marinas and 76, that is a ton, of recreational areas and 40 core operated parks and campgrounds. There's also Margaritaville at Lake Lanier Islands, which is a water park, campground, and a resort. There's always boat shows and events and things to do, like taking sunrise yoga at one of the many parks on the lake, and plenty of ways to enjoy the water even if you don't live on the lake. Even in the wintertime, they transform Margaritaville into a winter wonderland, and they blow in fake snow so that you can go snow tubing and ice skating. There's always something to do on Lake Lanier no matter the time of year, and it's one of the reasons why people love living anywhere near it. And I have to tell you, it's one of the reasons I love living here as well. And of course, you have all the fabulous boating activities and water sports that take place on the lake, and you have lots of great areas for hiking around Lake Lanier that you can take advantage of as well. Now, one of the main benefits that we found about living on Lake Lanier is the easy access that we have to our dock. If you enjoy getting to spend time on your boat and you like water sports on the weekends, it's simply right in your backyard, and you could not have an easier trip to your boat than just going directly out your back door and down to the water. We love to be able to get on our boat and out into the water, and the time that we save not having to store our boat at a marina, drive to the marina, haul all of our stuff to the boat, well, you get it. It saves a lot of time, and the convenience cannot be beat. Also, not to mention the headache if you're having to constantly take your boat on and off the trailer into the water at one of the many boat ramps that we have here around Lake Lanier. It's simply all at your fingertips when you have a dock right in your backyard. I mean, that's obvious, right? We find that we utilize the lake more by actually living on it, and it's not uncommon for us to be able to go out on a weekday for a sunset cruise and enjoy the quiet peacefulness of the lake. And I'll be honest, some days I just go down there and I sit on our boat and feel that floating sensation and just take in nature. Not only do we find that we enjoy the lake more throughout the week, but also year round, kind of prior to living on Lake Lanier, we would never go to the lake on the weekends during the winter or fall months. It just simply felt, I don't know, too cumbersome. But now that we live on the lake, we found that it's so enjoyable and so incredibly peaceful just to go out there and enjoy the lake and take a short boat ride, bundle up in a jacket, and enjoy the beautiful fall scenery that we have here on the lake. Another advantage is that you practically have the lake almost to yourself in the fall and winter months because there's not boat traffic out there on the lake, and you only kind of come across fishermen that are out there trying to catch the latest fish. Now, living on the lake does come with a con, and one of those things you're going to find about living on Lake Lanier is it is way more expensive than it once was, like way more than whenever we bought our house. Currently, at the time of filming this video, there are about 100 houses for sale on the lake that actually have docks or are close to the water, and the highest price tag being $5.9 million, and the lowest price of a home that actually has its own dock is around $575,000. Now, most homes below $1 million on the lake are in need of major renovations or have been renovated and are just tiny, not that big of a square footage, or it has a steep walk to the water. A harsh walk can be a massive drawback for a lake home, and it can impact your resale abilities. The walk to the water, depth of the water, and the location of the house is in, the views that you get from inside the house, and whether or not the home has a dock permit are all things that factor into the price of the home. No matter where you end up living on Lake Lanier, though, you are going to have to sacrifice one thing on your list or another. And this is one of the biggest things that you are going to have to understand about living on the lake, is that finding everything you want is going to be nearly impossible unless you have an unlimited budget, and even then it can be kind of hard. Many houses on Lake Lanier are on very steep lots and have quite a difficult walk to the water. Or you're going to find a house with a gentle walk, but it's going to cost you a pretty penny. Being on the lake itself is obviously a huge deal, and you're going to see houses that if you pick them up off the lake and move them, heck, even across the street, the value would substantially decrease. Sometimes people will come to look at lake houses and note that they don't like that the neighbor's house looks like it's worth $200,000, while the house they are touring is over $1 million. But that is what it's like living on Lake Lanier. There are houses that were built back in the 60s when the lake was created that have sat and have not been updated, and they don't really look the best. In a normal area, this would really drag down property values, but on the lake, it just doesn't translate that way. You can also find a house with a really distorted view of the water because of all the trees behind it, yet the neighbor's house has a fantastic view. Or one house can have a really steep walk and the neighbors can be much more gentle. You'll also find houses that sit very close to the lake but don't have their own dock. To some, this is nice if you don't want to actually use the lake, but you want the great views. Now, views are another piece of the puzzle that you may have to compromise on. Most houses have a buffer of trees between the house and the water and the lake itself, and this buffer of land is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, meaning that you cannot do anything to it, like nothing. Some people think, hey, that's no biggie. I'll just cut down those trees and have a perfect view of the lake. No, you cannot do that. Another thing to know about Lake Lanier is that not every house on the lake comes with its own dock, but there are plenty of communities that have community docks that are also a popular option for people who want to live on the lake but can't necessarily afford to have a house that has a dock permit. If you aren't really pleased with the quality of houses in your price point, you may want to consider a house with a neighborhood with a community dock. These communities have a limited number of boat slips available, and most of them are either tied to individual homes in the community or they're available for purchase from the HOA. This means that only some homeowners will have a dedicated boat slip in the community dock, and not every home in the community will have a dedicated boat slips. Most all of the community docks have day use slips which are dedicated for visitors dropping off and picking up guests, or maybe you store your boat at the local marina and you drive it over to your neighborhood dock to pick up your family and friends there. Typically, these slips are only available for day use and they do not allow for any long-term storage or overnight parking of your boat in that slip. If you don't want to own a boat and have the hassle of keeping up the maintenance of it and the overall cost to own it, but you would still like to occasionally rent one for a weekend during the summer when you have family and friends in town, this makes it very easy to do so. I mentioned earlier that not every house has a dock permit, and if it's imperative to you that you have access to the water from your home, we have to find you a house that has a dock permit because the Army Corps is no longer issuing permits. This means that you can't just buy a house that's on the lake that doesn't have a permit and apply to get your own. Well, you can, but there is a years-long wait list. All of the permits that are allowed to be on the lake have already been given out, and there's no current plans to issue more permits. When we are house hunting, we'll need to confirm that a permit is included with the house and can be transferred to you. Now, another thing to think about is that if a house is permitted for a single slip dock, that is really the only kind of dock that you'll be able to have for the most part. Sometimes you are able to increase the size of the dock, but it's often unusual. You have to take into consideration the neighbors that are around you. You also can't just say, If it's a platform dock, say, hey, I'll put in a single slip dock here. Typically, if it has a platform dock, there is a reason for it. In order to live on Lake Lanier, you have to follow the Army Corps of Engineers rules who owns and manages the lake. However, I think it's completely worth it. Like I mentioned earlier, living on the lake is so peaceful, and my husband and I have found so much joy in living here. So what do you think? Would you consider making a move to Lake Lanier? If so, I want to be a real estate agent. You can find my contact information below this video. And if you haven't checked out this video on Lake Lanier, you have to check it out.